She walked into the shooting range, her hands a little shaky, a modest bag in tow. In the eyes of the young shooters, she was just an old aunt accompanying her grandchild. But when she gripped that rifle and took aim, the chatter inside cut like a knife. No one knew those very hands 50 years ago had changed fate with an unrecorded shot in one of history's most clandestine missions. A unit that didn't exist, a hero silently erased. This isn't just Eleanor's story. This is the echo of invisible heroes you pass by every day without noticing. So, is there an Eleanor in your life carrying her own secret? Will you dare to see them? Let us know in the comments. Is there someone you consider ordinary looking, but believe could be a potential hero? We'd love to hear their stories. The California sun cast long shadows across Riverside Shooting Range in Northern California, its golden light filtering through the valley's morning mist. It was 8:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the range was already busy with its usual mix of law enforcement officers getting their monthly qualifications, competitive shooters preparing for weekend matches, and civilians working on their concealed carry skills. Eleanor Ellie Morrison had driven 43 miles from her small apartment in Pine Valley to get here. At 73 years old, she wasn't the typical customer at Riverside Range. But then again, nothing about Eleanor was typical, though society had spent decades making sure nobody knew that. She was one of those silent heroes, those classified warriors whose extraordinary service never officially existed. The kind of touching story that gets buried because it's too uncomfortable for people to admit that grandmothers can be deadlier than their worst nightmares. She pulled her 1998 Honda Civic into a parking spot between a lifted pickup truck covered in veteran stickers and a sleek sports car. As she closed the car door, nearby shooters had already noticed her presence. "Grandma's here, Jake," whispered a young man to his friend. Jake, 24 years old, recently discharged from the Marine Corps and trying to find his place in civilian life. Probably wants to learn for her grandson. This is exactly what's wrong with our society, isn't it? We look at older people, especially women, and we immediately assume they're helpless. We strip them of any possibility of strength, of capability, of a past that might humble us. How many touching stories are we missing because we're too arrogant to look beyond our prejudices? How many silent heroes are we dismissing because they don't fit our narrow vision of what heroism looks like? Whether Eleanor heard this or not was unclear. She shouldered her bag, large, old leather containing candies, tissues, and memories no one could imagine. The interior of Riverside Range was filled with familiar scents and sounds, gunpowder smoke, oiled metal, and distant firing sounds. Behind the front desk sat Carl Peters, 45 years old, 20 years in the Army, now working here as a safety supervisor. When Eleanor approached the desk, Carl gave her a warm smile. He was always patient with elderly customers, especially those who were obviously inexperienced. "Good morning, ma'am," said Carl, slowing his tone. "How can I help you?" "I want to shoot," said Eleanor, her voice surprisingly determined. "Is lane 7 available?" Carl looked at the forms. "Of course. Have you been here before?" "No, but—" Eleanor paused, then shook her head. "First time." What Eleanor didn't say was that this wasn't her first time at a shooting range. It wasn't even her first time at war, but it was her first time in 50 years being treated like a human being instead of a classified secret. Because that's what happens to silent heroes in our society. They get erased. Their extraordinary service gets buried under bureaucracy, and their touching stories become state secrets that never officially existed. "No problem," said Carl, extending the safety forms. "Let's go over the safety rules." Eleanor filled out the form with surprising speed. She answered every question without hesitation, nodded at every rule. Carl was somewhat surprised. Most new customers would ask more questions. "All right, ma'am, Lane 7 is yours. Will you be renting a firearm? Yes, please. Do you have a .308 Winchester? Carl's eyebrows raised slightly. Most new shooters would start with .22 caliber or 9mm. .308 was for experienced marksmen. We do, but maybe you'd like to start with a smaller caliber? .308 is quite powerful. No, said Eleanor, smiling. That will be fine. As Eleanor walked toward Lane 7, other shooters began to notice her. The way she moved, there was something there. Her steps weren't shaky, weren't hesitant. It was the walk of someone with purpose. Lane 7 was at the far end of the range, designed for the longest distance shots. Eleanor placed her bag on the bench and began removing its contents. Candies, tissues, and a small old photograph. The photograph was black and white, corners worn. It showed two women in military uniforms, both young, both smiling. On the back was a note. With Linda, Saigon, 1971. We will never forget. Eleanor gently placed the photograph back in her bag. Here's what they don't teach you in history class. The most classified operations were often carried out by people who looked exactly like Eleanor. Quiet, unassuming, dismissed by society. The perfect cover for extraordinary service that never officially existed. These touching stories about silent heroes aren't just inspiring. They're an indictment of how we treat the people around us. How many Eleanors do you pass on the street every day without a second glance? When Carl brought the .308 Winchester, he saw how Eleanor held it. The hands were no longer shaking, fingers naturally finding the correct positions as if they recognized the weapon. Target distance? Asked Carl. Is 300 yards suitable? Carl swallowed. 300 yards wasn't beginner level. Of course, but maybe we start with 100. 300 will be fine, said Eleanor, and Carl saw her eyes for the first time, really. Behind the thick glasses, these eyes had seen a lot. When Eleanor shouldered the rifle, Jake in Lane 6 turned to his friend. Hey, are you watching this woman? Her stance ... Alex turned too. Eleanor's position was perfect. Feet shoulder-width apart, weight balanced, breath control visible. This wasn't an amateur stance. Eleanor's first shot came. The sound was normal .308, but the recoil... Eleanor seemed completely unaffected. The rifle came back. She controlled it, prepared for the second shot. Bullseye, called Carl, looking through the target scope. There was amazement in his voice. Jake and Alex looked at each other. It could be luck. The second shot came. Bullseye again. Third shot, bullseye. Now the conversations at the range had stopped. Other shooters were looking toward Lane 7, following Eleanor's every shot. Fourth shot, fifth, sixth. All bullseyes, not just bullseyes, same point. Group diameter less than an inch. Do you feel that? That moment when everything you thought you knew gets shattered, when the quiet person you dismissed becomes the most extraordinary individual in the room? This is what happens when silent heroes stop hiding, when classified operations meet civilian ignorance, when touching stories finally get the recognition they deserve. But here's the question that should make you uncomfortable. How many times have you been Jake? How many times have you underestimated someone based on their appearance? Carl lowered the scope and looked at Eleanor. Ma'am, how is this possible? Eleanor smiled. For the first time, she really smiled. Practice. Within 10 minutes, a small crowd had gathered around Lane 7. Other shooters had stopped shooting, coming to watch Eleanor. Jake was closest. As a Marine, he recognized good marksmanship. But this was another level. Ma'am, said Jake respectfully, have you shot in competitions before? Eleanor paused, took the rifle to safety position. In a way. What kind of competitions? Eleanor looked at him. Jake's eyes held genuine curiosity, not mockery. She saw something familiar in his young face, a soldier's face. Were you in the military? Eleanor asked. Yes, ma'am, Marines, 2 tours in Afghanistan. Eleanor nodded. Thank you for your service. You're welcome, but you? Where did you learn to shoot? Eleanor hesitated for a moment. For 50 years, no one had asked this question, because for 50 years, no one had found her worth questioning about what she really did. After hearing this story, have you ever asked yourself, how many Eleanors are around you? How many silent heroes pass by you every day but you don't see them? This isn't just a story. This is a reminder of reality. And if this affects you, tell us in the comments, because when these stories are shared, they continue to live. Army, said Eleanor simply. Long time ago. How long? Asked Alex with his police experience. Vietnam. The word hung in the air. Jake swallowed. Vietnam meant Eleanor was at least in her 70s, probably older. But women soldiers in Vietnam? Were you a nurse? Asked Jake gently. Eleanor smiled, but this time the smile was different, a smile hiding things inside, in a way. And there it is, the moment when society's comfortable narratives start crumbling. Because we can handle female nurses in Vietnam, we can process that touching story. But what we can't handle is the truth about the classified operations, the extraordinary service that never officially existed, the silent heroes who were doing things that would terrify the very people who now dismiss them. Are you ready for the truth? Because once you hear it, you can never unknow it. Approaching the real question, Carl was looking at Eleanor's shot group again. 6 shots at 300 yards, all same point, the kind of precision he expected from professional snipers. Ma'am, said Carl slowly, this shot group, I was 20 years in the Army. I've only seen people at this level shoot like this from very specific individuals. Eleanor held the rifle in safety position, but her posture had changed, straighter, more alert, as if making a decision. What kind of individuals? She asked. Specially trained ones, snipers, long-range specialists? Eleanor nodded. And there were no female snipers in Vietnam. Officially. This time, Eleanor's smile disappeared completely. Her eyes focused on Carl's eyes, and for a moment, Carl saw not a 73-year-old grandmother, but someone else. Many things didn't exist. Officially. This is the moment that should make every single one of you angry. Not angry at Eleanor, angry at a system that erased her, angry at a society that classified her extraordinary service into oblivion, angry at the bureaucrats who decided that some touching stories about silent heroes were too dangerous to acknowledge. She served her country in ways that most people couldn't imagine, and her reward was 50 years of silence. If that doesn't provoke you, if that doesn't make you question everything about how we treat our veterans, then you're not paying attention. Silence. The noise of the range continued, but there was silence at Lane 7. Jake, Alex, Carl, and now a few more people had surrounded Eleanor. Jake was the first to speak. Ma'am, were you really in Vietnam, in combat roles? Eleanor reached into her bag and pulled out that old photograph. She handed it to Jake. Saigon, 1971, said Eleanor. Me and my best friend Linda. We were both in special assignments. Jake looked at the photograph. 2 young women, military uniforms, but the uniform wasn't standard. The patches weren't familiar. What kind of uniform is this? The kind that didn't exist, said Eleanor. For a unit that was never supposed to be there. Carl held his breath. Black Ops? Eleanor took the photograph back. That's what they call it now. Linda and I, said Eleanor, looking at the photograph, we did long-range reconnaissance, very long range, sometimes for days alone in Viet Cong territory. Sniper missions? Asked Carl. When necessary, but mostly intelligence, target identification, sometimes extraction support. Jake shook his head in amazement. I never heard Female snipers in Vietnam. You weren't supposed to hear, said Eleanor gently, because we never existed. Officially. Listen to those words carefully. We never existed. Officially. This is what happens to the most classified operations, the most extraordinary service. They get erased. The silent heroes get silenced permanently. And we, society, we go on believing comfortable lies about who serves and who doesn't, who fights and who can't. These touching stories aren't just inspiring. They're proof of systematic injustice. How many other Eleanors are out there carrying these secrets, never getting the honor they deserve? Eleanor handed the rifle to Carl. That's enough for today. But Carl didn't take the rifle. Ma'am, that shot group. Worldwide, maybe 3,000 people can shoot at that level. And you? I'm a grandmother, said Eleanor, living in Pine Valley, giving candy to my grandson. But no one believed her anymore. Alex, with his police experience, continued asking questions. What was your longest shot in Vietnam? Eleanor stopped. No one had been able to ask her this question for 50 years. According to official records, I never took any shots. According to unofficial records? Eleanor looked at him. The young man seemed serious, respectful. 1,247 yards, she said quietly, while carrying Linda to the extraction point. 3 Viet Cong snipers had identified our position. The crowd fell silent. In 1971, 1,247 yards. That was world record level. Was Linda wounded? Asked Jake. Eleanor's face tightened. Yes, very badly. I carried her 2 miles to the extraction point. Did she recover? Eleanor looked at the photograph again. Number she died 3 days later, at the field hospital in Saigon. Stop. Just stop and think about what you just heard. Eleanor carried her wounded best friend 2 miles through enemy territory. Linda died 3 days later, and for 50 years, nobody knew, nobody cared, nobody honored their sacrifice. This isn't just a touching story about silent heroes. This is a moral indictment of every single one of us who walks past these people every day without seeing them. If you're not angry right now, you should be. If you're not questioning everything about how we treat our veterans, you should be. And if you don't share this story, if you don't make sure Linda's name is remembered, then you're part of the problem. But here's what should really provoke you. This isn't just about Eleanor and Linda. This is about every silent hero we ignore, every extraordinary person we dismiss, every classified operation that gets buried, every touching story that never gets told. You have a moral obligation here, not just to watch and feel good about yourself, but to act, to look around you, to see the quiet people differently, to ask questions, to honor the service that never officially existed. Because if you don't, who will? Jake nodded. I'm sorry. So am I, said Eleanor, every day. Carl took the rifle from Eleanor, but his movement was respectful. Ma'am, this shooting skill, is it still in practice? Eleanor smiled. Number today was the first time I've held a gun in 50 years. Everyone was shocked. Jake was the first to speak. What do you mean? That shot group ... Some things aren't forgotten, said Eleanor simply. Muscle memory and... She paused. I had promised Linda that I would shoot for her one day. Carl's behavior changed. He was no longer looking at Eleanor as a grandmother. He was looking at her like an old friend. Ma'am, he said in an informal tone, at this range there's always an open lane for you. No charge. Eleanor nodded. That's not necessary. It is necessary, said Carl firmly. And, if you'll allow it, could you teach some things to the young shooters here? Just about technique? Eleanor looked at the crowd. Jake, Alex, and now other shooters had come. All their faces showed curiosity and respect. I'm not a teacher, said Eleanor. You don't need to be a teacher, said Jake. Just show us how you do it. While listening to this story, did you ever wonder, What do you really know about the elderly people in your own family, in your own neighborhood? That quiet neighbor, that kind grandfather, that humble grandmother. Maybe they too are unseen heroes. Maybe it's time to ask them to learn their stories. Because when these stories are lost, they're lost forever. Eleanor gathered her bag. Maybe, she said, maybe one day. Carl extended his hand. My name is Carl Peters. If you come back, ask for me. Eleanor shook his hand. Eleanor Morrison, and thank you for your understanding. As Eleanor walked toward the door, Jake called after her. Mrs. Morrison, that 1,247-yard shot, is that still a record? Eleanor stopped, turned back. What record? Woman Sniper World Record. Eleanor smiled. Her last smile was the most genuine. Jake, for there to be a record, I would have had to officially take a shot. I never officially took any shots. And she left. As Eleanor got into her Honda Civic, she noticed her hands were shaking again. But this wasn't fear. This was relief. For the first time in 50 years, someone had asked. For the first time, someone had listened as if it mattered. On the car's dashboard was another photograph. Eleanor herself, but at 50, with her grandson Tommy. Tommy was now 25 in college, studying engineering. Eleanor had never told him anything about Vietnam. Maybe it was time. Carl Peters' phone rang. Riverside Shooting Range. Carl speaking. Hello, Carl. Eleanor Morrison. Carl smiled. Mrs. Morrison, how are you? Fine, thank you. I have a question. That young man, Jake, does he still come? Yes, twice a week. Why? I want to teach him something, if he's interested. Carl's face lit up with a big smile. Mrs. Morrison, you don't need to ask him. He'll be very eager. Okay, I'm coming tomorrow, 9 o'clock. Mrs. Morrison, do you have a weapon to bring? Silence on the phone. Then Eleanor. Yes. A special one. The next day, Jake had come early. When Eleanor arrived, Alex was with him and 2 more people. Eleanor had brought a different bag this time, a hard metal case. When she opened it, the weapon inside surprised everyone. An old M21 sniper rifle, Vietnam era. It had small scratches and wear marks, but was in perfect condition. This is my rifle, said Eleanor simply. From 1971. Jake held his breath. This is a real M21. Yes, and I'm going to show you how to shoot with it. Eleanor's teaching method wasn't in books. She wasn't teaching technique. She was teaching philosophy. The gun is just a tool, said Eleanor. What matters is what you use it for. Jake asked, in Vietnam, that 1,247-yard shot, how did you feel? I was scared, said Eleanor honestly. Very scared. But Linda was dying, and the only way to save her was that shot. How did you stay so calm? I didn't stay calm, but I had a mission. And sometimes mission is stronger than fear. The third week, Eleanor gave her final lesson. I've taught you the technical things I could teach, she said, but I couldn't teach you the most important thing. What's that? Asked Jake. How to forget, because I never learned how to forget. Eleanor put the M21 in her bag. Linda's story ends here, but your stories continue. Making those stories beautiful is your mission. After Eleanor left Riverside that day, the range was never the same. Carl hung Eleanor's photograph on the wall, that old photograph with Linda. He put a small plaque underneath. Silent heroes, never officially existed, always officially honored. Jake now teaches others. Alex became a sniper instructor in the police, and they all remember Eleanor's words. Mission is stronger than fear. But most importantly, they now look at elderly people differently. Because they know that behind every wrinkle there's a classified story. Behind every quiet moment there might be extraordinary service hidden. this touching story affected you, start looking for the Eleanors around you. Ask them. Listen. Because these stories only live when they're told. And your mission, our mission, is to keep these silent heroes alive. This isn't just Eleanor's story. This is the story of thousands of heroes who never officially existed. This is the story of those who performed classified operations, gave extraordinary service, but never received honor. Tell us in the comments, have you ever encountered an Eleanor like this? Do you know any silent heroes? Because every touching story matters and every hero deserves to be remembered. And here's your final challenge. Don't just watch this and move on. Don't just feel good about yourself for caring about silent heroes for 15 minutes. Make this matter. Look at the elderly people in your life differently. Ask them about their past. Honor their extraordinary service if they have it. Share their touching stories if they'll let you. Because the real tragedy isn't that Eleanor had to wait 50 years for recognition. It's that there are thousands more Eleanors out there who never will get it unless you act. This isn't just Eleanor's story. This is all of our story. Because we're all someone's Eleanor. And we all have a Linda, some living, some only in memories. But they all deserve to be remembered. They all deserve honor. And they all deserve to have their classified service, their extraordinary sacrifice, finally acknowledged. Here's the truth. Touching stories about silent heroes aren't entertainment. They're a call to action. They're a moral imperative. They're proof that extraordinary service exists all around us, in the most unlikely people, in the most quiet places. Never officially existed doesn't mean never mattered. It means we failed to see what was right in front of us. Don't let that happen again.